Great. Well, Edward, congratulations on a really wonderful film. Maybe you could just start by introducing it a little bit. All My Loving. What was the idea for this film? What was your inspiration to have this quite particular setup of the three siblings, all at different moments in their life?
I started thinking about this movie quite a while ago, and when I watched, the first instant came 20 years ago, when watching a film called Afterlife by Hirokazu Koreeda, and it was about a bunch of people who had just died and went to heaven, and there's a person there saying, "You got to film everyone welcome to heaven, but before you enter heaven, please think of the one memory that made you happy in your life and make a movie about it. And then this movie will eternally play when you enter heaven. This is the one memory that you have that made you happy." And these three characters are basically three people that don't know what that memory is. They can't find it. They don't know. And there's actually a very tiny wall between themselves and happiness. And just, in the end it became about a movie, All My Loving became a movie about three people in search of, their inner peace or happiness.
And you've got a really phenomenal cast. Each, they've got their own kind of strand of the film, and we sort of really delve into each of their characters. We get up very close to them. So it must have been very important to you to cast just three of the right people. So with Lars, Nelly and Hans, how did you decide on these three cast members, and how did you work with them to kind of execute your vision as you wanted it?
Well, it was a long thought process rather than casting process. All of them are, have done quite a bit and are great actors, so I knew all of them. But I was thinking back and forth. But over the years, they've been in my mind for a long time, and so over the years it just sort of crystallized that it had to be them. And I was very happy and lucky to get all of them. And we actually had to shoot it in a very particular time slot when all three of them had time. And so, and then in terms of working with them, I very much believe in just sharing the script, talking about it beforehand of what the movie is and what it feels like, and then let's go. And then all of them have a very clear instinct of what they want to play and what they can play, and then I'm just there to watch them and be the first audience. But I very much believe in taking the actors in and giving them the response. I mean, they just know what to do if they're good. So, and all three of them are brilliant. So that was a wonderful collaboration of just playing and watching.
It feels to me that each of the locations is also just as important. I think to kind of make this distinction that we're moving to these three different parts of the story, but they also seem to play a big role in the kind of visual impact of the film. So how important were each of the locations to you?
Very important. I mean, it felt like for Lars' story, for the pilot story, we were looking for a place that just feels empty in a way, because his life's empty. And he lives in an apartment that has no pictures on the walls. It's basically, he could move out in a second. His daughter tells him, "I have trouble at home, I'd rather move out." And he's incapable of telling her, "Well, why don't you move in with me?" He doesn't have a room for her, even though he has a daughter. There's no, in the extra bedroom, there's probably a trainer, like a treadmill is in there. And so, he fills his life with nothingness. And in the end he realizes that maybe it's a bit empty and he should fill it with something, but it's too late. No one really wants to give him anything. And he doesn't want to commit, so he doesn't get anything back. So that those locations are sort of a mirror of his inside, I guess. Turin, where the second story takes place, is a great city because in a way it's a bit morbid or melancholic. It's a bit, there's a faded glory about the city. There used to be many companies, Fiat and Ferrero and big industry town. But there's a lot of unemployment problems, people have moved away, and the streets are quite empty. And so that sort of reflected that story. And the last story, it just feels lively, walls are being knocked out of the house, and so it just gets, I guess, livelier and livelier.
And one of the things that stands out for me in terms of a theme or the connecting dots between each of these stories is kind of something that looks great on the outside, you know, particularly in the first story. You know, he was a pilot, he was sort of able to have the women he wanted, had this hedonistic lifestyle, and then, you know, things start to kind of fade before his eyes, and there's that kind of feeling of angst, something being missing. And then, you know, definitely in the second one, for example, you know, everything's sort of like looking very beautiful and glamorous, but underneath something's broken. So is that something that was an important theme to connect each of their stories?
I didn't quite get the question. Could you?
Was is the connecting some of the connecting parts between the stories, the fact that when things look one way from the outside and then underneath there's something missing, there's something broken?
Very good question. Yes. Yeah. I mean, in terms of, it's definitely a connective tissue. I don't quite know if, you know, it's more intuitive. It's nothing. I mean, I didn't plan that sort of rationally. It just came from the gut, basically. You know, that all of them need something to, you know, there's a certain empty spot that needs to be filled. You know, I guess, you know, the story came from all of us having, or myself asking myself very often, you know, what actually makes you happy? You know, very, very quickly you forget, you know, in your daily routine, and you go to work, you get some coffee, you meet your friends, you know, there's sort of a grind, a rut that you get in, and you lose touch with the simplicity of it all. And so I guess that the connective tissue is there, sort of a certain simplicity in all the stories.
And is it significant as well that they do inhabit kind of quite middle class, relatively affluent lives? These aren't people on the margins that sort of so obviously would have suffered in their lives, but it's kind of pointing out the fact that sort of emotional trauma and, you know, what goes on beneath is actually not always connected that much to your, you know, financial stability or whatever.
Yeah, well, all of us know, hopefully, that money doesn't make you happy, right? It's more friends, family. You know, last night I walked into the cinema at the premiere, and there were 1,000 people sitting there, and I was like, whoa! And you walk into the room, and suddenly I realize, oh, there's my son, my 13-year-old son, and I go to him and I think, like, great that you're here. You know, you're the most important person in this room, and you know, that makes you happy. But you know, these characters, some of them still need to find that, or some of them have children, but they, you know, they're so bogged down in the problems that also brings, or in the tasks that you have to fulfill with that. So, yeah, I think, you know, we didn't want money to be an issue with these characters. Thinking, I mean, they're not rich; they're just regular. Or one of them has more money and other a little less, but so they're not rich. But they're definitely, money is not an issue. Other things become important, like parents, you know, their stability, their lives, their health, their children become, you know, what Lars's child becomes, or the absence of children in the second story. So those are problems we all can relate to, rich or poor, it doesn't really matter.
And we do have a lot of empathy, I feel, with all of the characters, even if their behaviour isn't always, you know, presenting someone who's so immediately likeable. And, you know, there is an intensity to it. What do you want people to take away? What do you want people's reflections to be after watching this film?
Well, I think I want them to, I guess, you know, I think that first impulse I had with watching Koreeda's film, and that question of what makes you happy, you know, that you maybe sit in the room and watch the cinema, and after 2 hours the lights go, and think like, hey, let's reflect a second of what is my part in life, what does make me happy, you know, what does fulfill me. and then walk home and think like, I'm going to work on that. You know, I'm gonna, you know, enjoy this more, and spend more time with that in my life, or you know, allow myself to flourish in that field. But you know, I'd hate to give a message. You know, that's something that you know people feel and connect with the characters and take out of the movie if we're lucky.
And how does it feel to have your film here at the Berlin Film Festival? And what do you see the importance of this festival is in the broader cinema landscape?
First of all, it's great because there's a regular audience. You know, you can buy a ticket and walk in. It's not just industry. So you have, for the first time, basically, my film, before I had finished it, maybe 10, 15 people had seen it, just friends, producers, cinematographer, you know, and giving me advice of what to cut and or suggestions of what to cut, where to stretch it, where to spend some time. But you never know, does it work or not? And until you show it with an audience that, and you feel, oh, they react, they laugh, they stay in the seat. Suddenly it's dead quiet in the cinema. So, you know, that's a great experience to have here. And also, what's great that this festival basically gives you room to experiment. They don't want Panorama. Doesn't want films that are just normal films that you can watch in the cinema. They want to discover the specialty in each film. You know, they want to present the audience. They want to challenge the audience. The audience wants to be challenged. They want to watch films that they can't get during the year. They want to watch films from Vietnam, from China, from Russia, from South America, wherever in the world, and want to be challenged. They want to be presented with different cultures, different ideas, and discover things that they haven't seen during the regular cinema season. So that's the specialty about this festival, I guess.
And do you think there's something that makes German cinema distinct? I think, you know, you can maybe see sort of common characteristics of films from different parts of the world. You know, what do you think it is that characterises German cinema, and how do you see the health of the industry here?
Well, German cinema still needs a lot of help in terms of, because there's a fairly small market, German language, but it's big enough that it's self-contained, that it basically can make money by succeeding in Germany. The advantage that smaller countries like, let's say, Holland or Denmark or Sweden have, that the markets are so small that you really have to orientate yourself internationally as well. You can make a Dutch movie, but still think, well, you know, only Holland's maybe a bit, you need to sort of broaden the audience, because otherwise you just have like 3-4 million people that you can target, and so that's a bit of the problem, I think, that Germany has, that it's so self-satisfied with the market that doesn't need to look beyond the horizon. And I sometimes think we need to evolve and think more globally, to think, you know, how do other countries and cultures feel about our films, and not just make it for the local market. So I think there's definitely room on the upside still for German cinema to become as important as, for example, Hungarian cinema. You know, they have films that seem to reach, at least on the art house level, a bigger audience.
Okay, well, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, and congratulations again on the wonderful film.
Thank you.